Hi everyone, this is Kunal, founder of Analytics Vidhya.
As social media platforms and tech companies are increasing privacy protections, brands are realizing that it is no longer that easy to pay dollars to reach consumers. And this has led to the rise of community startups. A community startup is a startup built on the back of a strong, organically grown community base, and that is hyper focused on adding value to the community. At this stage, you might wonder what are the ways in which a community startup has become a large business. And that's where the story of Analytics Vidya comes in. In this episode of the Founder Thesis podcast, your host Akshay Dutt interviews Kunal Jain, who is one of the early pioneers in community building and the founder of Analytics Vidya. Kunal shares his journey of starting a community that bootstrapped its way and how the community became a full-fledged platform for analytics professionals with a global reach. Stay tuned and subscribe to the Founder Thesis podcast and any audio streaming app to learn from veteran startup founders who have changed the landscape.
And then went to IIT Bombay for 5 years, studied aerospace engineering, bachelor's and master's. And post IIT Bombay, I went to Capital One in UK, spent 4 years with Capital One.
And Capital One has given birth to a lot of entrepreneurs. Quite a few founders I've interviewed have worked in Capital One. So I guess it has that kind of a culture which promotes entrepreneurial thinking.
Yeah, very much. In fact, as a culture, it promotes open thinking. It promotes people challenging each other very openly, and it's still one of those organizations where I see a lot of people venturing out from Capital One and then realizing, oh, the world is not safe and coming back. So very high comeback rate of Capital One alumni.
Hmm. And so, what next after your Capital One stint?
So I spent about 4 years at Capital One. Finally, in 2010, I came across an opportunity where Aviva Life Insurance was setting its analytics team. And also, I mean, UK was still struggling with the entire recession and the growth seemed far. So I said that I've got experience of a more mature market. Why not now set this team up at Aviva? So that's when in 2010 I moved to Aviva Life Insurance, started this team, which initially it was just two people, and that scaled to about 25 people by the time I left. And at that time, we had created one of the best analytics unit in the country in insurance. So the kind of problems we were working on, the way we had structured data.
What was the impact of this unit? Give me some examples.
So we started in 2010, right? In 2012, the agent productivity and the agent selection was entirely driven by data, right? So every agent, when they fill their application, we had an engine running at the back saying what are the chances that this person would become a good agent, and their day to day engagement with their sales managers and branch managers was driven by data, right? So in those 4 years, I uh, worked very closely with the entire sales team, the banking partners. So we created a model for one of the bank partners to tell them who in their customer base would have high propensity to buy insurance from Aviva, right? So we essentially worked as an analytics team at the bank's end. But what happened was during this period of scale, right, my role ended up becoming very managerial, right? To the extent that I was spending, I think, good 70% of my time in meetings. The remaining 30 would end up in a lot of managerial tasks. So I'd stopped enjoying that role. I was feeling that, I'm not growing as much on my technical front. And in 2013, finally, I said that let me start a blog and then share my learnings. So another particular instance I remember was as we were trying to see if macroeconomic variables have an impact on the renewal payments which customers make, right? So if the economy go south, does it what does it mean for the renewal premiums which would come in? And there was no place I could go and ask these questions. So I ended up calling a few batchmates from IIT days who I knew were working in analytics. So this need of having a place to share learnings, ask questions, get answers from experts kept coming back again and again while I was at Aviva for about 4 years. So in 2013, I said, okay, I don't know the way to solve it, but at least let me start by putting a blog out there where I can share my learnings with the larger world. And that's how Analytics Vidhya started. So 2013, I booked the domain, I started writing articles. And from there, it started taking its own life and shape, right? So people started coming back. A couple of friends said that we think this is brilliant. We would want to also contribute. And in about 9 months, so I did this in parallel to my job for about 9 months. It was very evident that I could create a much larger impact by doing this full time. But there were a lot of uncertainties in terms of, for example, there was no revenue model figured out by that time. But what I could feel clearly was that the impact is much bigger. And because I had savings of, so I could go on without revenue for a couple of years. So I said that let me take a plunge and do this full time. So 2014, I put down my papers at Aviva, started building analytics with their full time.
What was the like hits or users, or like what were some of those stats when you quit?
Yeah. So on my last day, so in that month we had got some 8,000 visits a month. So that was the number. In fact, I remember very clearly one of my friends at Aviva asked this, that it's a good personal blog to start with. You're getting some visits, but how big do you think would it become? And at that point, my answer was, if this grows 4x in a year, I'll be happy. We ended up growing 10x that year on number of volumes. But so very early days, but that impact was, I could feel that impact, right? People coming back, asking questions on comments, and then the engagement on, let's say, LinkedIn or other platforms. So it felt that we are onto something. It's just that we were not able to define it or clearly see how it would essentially become a business. So
What was the plan when you quit? You wanted to build traffic and monetize through ads, or what? Like,
at that time, it was just that, let me convert this into a community. So we added discussion portals as soon as I went full time. And monetization was essentially through ads. So there was no other monetization. In fact, the first revenue came 3 months after I had quit Aviva and was doing this full time. So the thought was to convert it into a community portal. So we launched these discussion portals. Then we added a hackathon platform so we could release problem statements and community would work on it. We started doing meetups across the country. So we would do a meetup. We in each meetup we'll take a problem. We'll help people solve through that through 2017, we did India's largest AI and ML conference in Bangalore. 2018, we launched our own courses and programs.
so till 2017, it was essentially a like a media company. You were doing everything which a media company does, like producing content and running events. Like these are typically how media companies monetize, like advertising on content and event. And events would have been like paid events, I'm guessing, or sponsored events. Like,
So paid events and sponsored events. So it was actually till 2018, it was a media model in terms of business, and then the DNA was that we let's continue to build a strong user base and community.
and by 2018, what were the numbers?
So 2018, we would be getting probably 1 million visits a month. That's where we were. And in fact, we delayed launch of our courses for a good year or so because we felt that the community might all of a sudden feel that we are now trying to sell products. So we deliberately delayed, or we were not sure whether we should be launching those or not. But at the same time, the most common question we used to get at that time was that, can we, so we really love the blogs you are writing and the way you are breaking down complex concepts. What do we do next from here? And then how can I take this learning further? So finally in 2018, we said that looks like our users only want this and they're not getting it elsewhere. So let's launch courses on the platform. But
And what was your before you launched courses? What were you making revenue wise? Was it breaking even for you, or did you have to raise funds to meet expenses? And did you have a team? Like, tell me a little bit more about that 2014 to 2018 journey.
so we always operated the business as a bootstrapped business, right? So I did raise small friends and family round when I was starting. And the idea was very simple, that it gives you longer runway. You are anyway dipping into your savings. So might as well, lengthen the runway. So I raised a small round in 2015 through my friends and family. But we were very lean team, right? So in fact, this 2017 conference which we did, right? So we were 13 people at that time. None of us had any experience of running a professional event, and
These 13 people would have all been content creators, like writing articles, blogs.
mostly content creators, a couple of developers, and we had just hired first product manager and one salesperson. So very lean team.
Salesperson for like getting sponsorships of events or selling ad space.
And hackathons. So hackathons we had started in 2015. So we would essentially have these, let's say, annual kind of arrangements with companies. So at that time, a lot of edtech companies used to be our clients, right? So Great Learning or some of these companies would advertise on our portal. So the salesperson would essentially look at these relationships and see how can we go this.
And hackathons were they like a source of hiring? Like companies would hire through hackathons, and you would charge them something to help them hire.
So it started as an engagement tool, but very quickly we saw that it could be used for hiring. It could be used for crowdsourcing solutions, right? So if a company is facing a problem, they could put it and the community would love. So that's what we were doing. So for a company to come, it was essentially three reasons. They could look at hiring, they could look at crowdsourcing, or they could even do it for branding, right? That we are doing some interesting, cool work. Here it is. And when we have worked with almost every big company out there in analytics and data science to conduct these hackathons. And I still believe that for the community, they're a phenomenal tool, right? It just focuses all the energy on problem solving. And typically on one weekend, right? So we would have these weekend hackathons. The community was
And this is an offline thing, like the hackathon.
no, it was online, and there were hybrid ones as well. But typically, over a weekend, when there is a hackathon happening, the community would exchange between 10 to 15,000 messages about the problems and the learnings or what they are trying. So in fact, those weekends used to be crazy, right? So you would start the hackathon at 12 midnight, and then you'll see a surge of people coming and downloading the data set, looking at the problem statement, and then till like 3 o'clock in the night, people would still ask questions about the data sets, and we would reply them on Slack or discussion portals. And then people would start building their models and see the leaderboard. And
What is the problem they are solving in a hackathon? Like you would give them a dummy data set and ask them to draw some.
the idea was to have these real life problems as close to real life as possible. So at no point have we created dummy data for hackathons. So we would work with companies to bring their problems out. At times, the companies would want masking of data, so we would do that masking in their own campuses, etc. But
Yeah, it's a personally identifiable information would get masked. Huh.
yeah, you would. extract all of that out, and you would leave any sensitive information out, but still retain the flavor of a data problem. And then the intent was to create something which the companies can then take later on and solve their problems. So we were working closely with companies, bringing these problems and releasing them in form of uh, closed problem statements, right? So it was not open problem statement like we usually have in a lot of hackathons, but it was a closed problem statement. And yeah, that worked brilliantly for the community members to come and work on a common.
And what was like? Give me an example. What kind of problem?
So, for example, this was for let's say, insurance aggregator, right? So, we were looking at what are the lead propensity that they would buy an insurance product from these companies, right? So, we had a lead data from these customers, their behavioral data. So, for example, how many times have they visited the product pages, etc. And we had to predict whether they would buy in insurance in a particular time frame, right? Similarly, there was another problem from a retail giant. They wanted to predict sales of specific items during the holiday season. So that was another problem. So again, most of these problems were very close to what people were working in their real life. The only difference is we would do the hard work of collating the data, making sure that the data is at least at a place where it could be released in form of a hackathon, and then open it up to the community. So that's the kind of problem statement. So yeah, these 13 people looking at hackathons.
And you said you had a product manager and a developer or two. What was it that you were building? This was like a WordPress site that you were.
So the blog was on WordPress, but for example, this entire hackathon platform was built in house, right? So people could upload their models. It would evaluate it in real time and show them what is their rank on the leaderboard. People could do discussion. So that was all built in house, and we were still toying around with product ideas, right? So, for example, we were looking at integrating a coding window into our platform, or we were also looking at building a mobile app, more evolved version of discussion portal. So there were these so we always wanted to be more product focused as opposed to a media business, but it would take time before you would reach there.
And what is the coding language that is used by data science professionals?
Today it's largely Python, but back in 2014, right? So that in itself has gone through its journey, right? So 2014, SAS, which is a proprietary software, used to be the most commonly used language at that time. Then people started exploring open source, and for a couple of years, R looked like the main language which people would use. And I think late 2015 onwards, Python started capturing a lot more because it's production ready. The ecosystem is much bigger. And today, I think it's hands down Python. So almost 50-60% of the data scientists would by default use Python in their day to day tasks.
And Python is an open source database tool.
Python is an open source programming language, and it has a whole set of libraries which are open source, right? So I want to run a statistical analysis. I can just add that library and run that code. I want to build a machine learning model. There is a library called scikit-learn. I can import that, build my model, and be good with it, right? Compared to, for example, with SAS, you would pay mm, the license fee and then server fee and all those things. So that democratization happened during that period, right? So in fact, when I joined Aviva, right, the kind of costs we incurred in setting up the team, they almost went to zero by 2014, right? So the only cost you would pay in setting up a data science team was essentially the hardware and the payroll. Those were the only two costs left. So that democratization happened during that period. And I think a large part of our growth was also fueled by that people wanted learn more and people wanted to know more. And that's where the community came in very handy, and a place where people could spend time without kind of any restrictions. And that's what fueled our growth at that time. And then, as you said, right, at that time, the business model was largely media driven, and we were close to break even at all points, or breaking even. But the intent was always to take that and reinvest that into businesses. So I think in the first few years, we did not make profit, although we always had sight to profitability. But the intent was to grow the community as much as possible. That's what we were doing.
And what revenue were you doing by 2018?
So 2018, we would be roughly half $1 million. So 2017-18 would be roughly $500,000 at that time.
About 4 CR. Okay. And this was, what was the split here? Like how much from advertisement, how much from event fees, and
So large, yeah. So largely advertisement driven, and event was, so even 2017 when we did was about 30% of the revenue. So it quickly was very evident that this could be very profitable business in itself. 2018 when we launched courses, so in the first year we almost had three almost equal revenue lines. So courses gave us B2C monetization, hackathon and hiring was also keen, and then the community events. So we ran for a few years in that model, that doing.
this courses that you launched, like how intensive were they? And tell me about the journey of the courses.
Right. So courses were largely self-driven, but with very application-oriented and industry-relevant examples. Right. So this was the time when, for example, Coursera was probably the first place where people would learn. And the biggest problem with Coursera was that it came across as very academic. Right. So while you would learn the theory behind machine learning, you would not be able to take that and apply it to solve problems, right? And we were anyway seeing a lot of people struggling with even building basic models in hackathons, right? So people would come by doing these courses, and the minute they'll see a unstructured problem out there, they'll struggle. So the thought was that, can we create these courses which help people become more industry ready, right? So just to give an example, when we were teaching machine learning, we didn't say that this is the equation behind these models and this is how you build it. We said, okay, let's take an example that you want to predict house prices in an area, right? How would you do it? Assuming you have data of past sales. So the first logical way is, you would say that, I'll say that it's an average. So that's your first model, right? So just taking that fear out of machine learning and saying that, if you could say that this average is my first prediction, this is your first model. Now, if you have to make it more specific, what would you do, right? So you could introduce some sort of segmentation. In this case, it could be, for example, geography. So where is that house placed? And the average area, and then you could introduce more variables. Is it how many bedrooms are there, etc. So all of a sudden, you're not approaching it from theory first. You're taking that application, and then while you're doing this, you'll introduce the challenges that you want to capture how many bedrooms are there in each apartment, but you don't have this data. So how do you capture that? And then bringing in. So our courses were very application oriented.
So, how did the application part of it happen through self-paced manner? Like people would, like you had some way for people to upload their work that they do on Python, which would get.
We were using the hackathon platform which we had built, right? So in between the courses, we would say that, okay, here is a problem which will now work, and you can go to this URL, upload your solution, and see how good or bad you were. So that's where, and in fact, so a lot of experience of running these hackathons, the kind of problems people face when they come to these hackathons for the first time, gave a lot of insight in terms of how we should go about building our courses.
Mm, Amazing. And what is the file? So Like Python generates a file, or what? Like I'm not from a coding background, so I don't.
You can upload a Python script, or you could upload a model as well, right? So you could say that here are my predictions for each of these cases. Go and validate how good or bad they are. So both the options were there. The preference obviously was for people to upload their Python script, because then you can truly validate them.
So that Python script would be run on the data, because the data you are only providing. So you would run that script on the data and then validate it against some ideal response, and through software flag what are the gaps.
Exactly. Exactly. And data also, just nuance, so data itself was also broken into two parts. So one was visible publicly, right? So when people upload their solution, they need some indication of how good their model is. So that was on this public part of the data. And then there was part which was held from public, which was private data. And the actual rankings finally was on the private data, so you're not allowed to see the data on which your final model will be evaluated. And that's how this entire solution was constructed.
Okay, so like for example, it would be a data set with 10,000 rows. You would only share 1,000 rows with them, but you would run the script on the 10,000 rows.
You would exactly, you would only see the model working on a part of data, right? And again, depending on the data, the actual split could vary. So for example, if it is a time based data, right? So then you what you would say is that I'll open the data for 2018 and I'll evaluate you on the outcome I saw in 2019, right? So use all the insights you need from 2018, but 2019, which you are not seeing, is what would be used to evaluate it. So essentially, make it as close to real life as possible, because these are exactly the challenges which these data professionals face on a day-to-day basis. And gamify it, make it exciting, make it essentially a place where a community would love to spend their weekend doing this learning.
And what were these courses priced at? And typically, how long did people take to finish a course? And what all courses did you launch?
So the first course which we launched, that was launched at about 4,500 rupees price point. It would take anywhere between 3 to 6 months, as long as you are spending, let's say, 4 or 5 hours a week. And so that was the first course which we launched, which was essentially introduction to data science, right? So building all of those grounds up. And from there on, we started adding more and more courses. So there were courses on visualization, there were courses on advanced machine learning, there were courses on natural language processing, computer vision, and a lot of these advanced topics. So in about 2 years, we went from one courses to almost 30 odd courses. And then
And average price?
average price would so with time we continued to bring the prices up. And what we also started doing was we started bundling these courses, right? Because from a user perspective, they would want to go in a logical flow. So the average price point, if you buy a specific course, would still be around 5,000 rupees, but these bundles would cost you anywhere between 15,000 to 20,000 rupees at that time. And yeah, this was the time where we were running the business in a very bootstrapped manner. So for example, we would launch the courses first, collect the revenue, and then go and build them. So we would pre-launch these courses. so so a lot of those hacks to just and then it was a brilliant way to see how much the demand is out there, and you could accordingly either accelerate it, or say that we are missing something. How do we iterate from there? So, and then in 2020, we launched essentially a program called as Black Belt, which is our subscription to all Analytics Vidhya courses, along with one-on-one mentoring. So the day you take this program, you get subscription to all the courses, but there is a mentor who would get on a call with you, explain which course to take, when, customize it to your needs, and the mentor would be in touch with you throughout this journey. So we then moved away from selling these individual courses, and we said this is the only product which we are selling. And
And what is the price of black belt course?
so black belt today costs about 65,000 rupees or $1,000, depending on who you're choosing it. But when we launched it at that time, it was about 40,000, and then we added more courses, content, services on top of it. And same time, so 2020, 21, we launched another program called Bootcamp, which was essentially aimed for people in 0 to 5 years bracket. And the intent was that each person who comes into this program should be able to get a job in industry. So it was a job guaranteed program and a selection based program, right? And in fact, first batch we
It was self learning, or this was like a cohort based?
Oh, this was a cohort-based instructor-led program, and in fact, the first batch was actually aimed to be a physical program. And it was supposed to go live on 1st April 2020, and and then COVID hit, right? So then we moved it entirely online. We launched the program in July. So that's the second kind of big program which we have, where we select the students who come into the program, and then every student who comes in, it's our responsibility to make sure that they get placed in the industry by the time they finish their program and then go through the coursework.
I have a bunch of questions I want to ask you. Um, so these modules. So initially, you were selling these modules which were like focused on one topic. Did you see that the completion rates were low, etc., because of which you evolved it and stopped selling those? Like, what was the reason to stop selling modules?
So it was two things, right? So modules individually. Actually, to large degree, it was driven by the fact that we were bootstrapped, right? So at any point, you would only have limited bandwidth to create these courses. So we continued to add.
But it's a once a course is created, you can keep selling it, right? Like,
Correct. So in the bundles there, we are still using the same content, but then so essentially it's a call of how much ownership do you want to take in the journey of the learner, right? And we said that instead of looking at those as point in time, let's own the entire journey, give as much guidance as possible. So that was one reason. And completion rates. So in general, any self-paced course would have far lower completion rates, right? But our completion rates were still from an industry benchmarking perspective very high, right? So almost 15 to 20% of people who were taking these courses were completing these courses. So which is a lot higher than what anyone else had in industry at that time. So that was not the reason. The reason was just that we want to create impact in the life of learner. And the best way to do it is say that for the next 2 years, we'll work with you on a one-on-one basis in as close as a manner as possible, and create an impact. So that's why we moved away from selling these individual courses. Also, I think the other factor was that ultimately the effort required to sell a module versus an entire program was, I mean, the differential is not very high. And then the learners also wanted more. So it was just a good win-win solution for everyone involved. That's why we said that we would just focus on programs.
so today, nobody talks of self-paced courses. I guess that is fundamentally because these courses like put you in a race to the bottom. Like, if you can create, then other people can also create, and eventually the differentiation starts going down. The completion rates at like 15% is not. I mean, it's not ideal to sell something which only 15% of your users fully benefit from. Um, so I guess that's why the industry as a whole has moved away from these self-paced courses into more like cohort-based courses.
So it's a fairly fast evolving industry, right? So, for example, so Coursera started this in a lot of ways, right? The self-paced revolution in that sense. And then people said, okay, this is good, but the completion rates are low. So then people started adding more things, right? So mentorship, for example, is a great value add, or peer learning could be another such so people continue to do that. But I think this question that ultimately how much is the impact in life of learner is what is driving this industry, right? So there, I think the learning you go through in a cohort based is fundamentally a lot better. However, I think the right balance sits somewhere in between, because there, specifically for example, in our case, right, there are a whole lot of learners who can't commit that time on an ongoing basis, right? So they can't say that every Wednesday and every Friday I'll take this course from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., or I'll for the next 6 months, I'll devote every weekend to learning this. And that's where self-paced are still brilliant ways to address that need. So my sense is that you would ultimately have a mix of the two modes, and which would be the best way going forward. And for a lot of corporate clients, self-paced still makes a lot of sense, because they can't say that the entire team would go and attend this training program for next 5 days or 7 days from a business perspective. So there, I think what is clear is individually self-paced can't make that much of impact, but at the same time, not everyone can commit to a complete cohort driven program. So the sweet spot is probably somewhere in between, and matching the user need to the right product, right? So a student coming out of college is best suited for an instructor led program. A working professional with varying demands of work is probably more suited to a flexible learning curriculum.
So your flexible curriculum is black belt, where there is an element of an instructor in the form of the mentor, and yet it is self-paced.
And the mentor works very closely with saying, okay, for the next 15 days, how much time are you, let's say, committing? So let's put these milestones in next 15 days. You'll be able to do this. So it's self-paced, but it is very closely working with these mentors to make sure. Because again, if you leave it as completely self-paced, you'll not see the impact, right? So the mentor has to go back. So, for example, let's say a mentor agreed on this 15-day milestone. On 15th day, the mentor would shoot a mail saying, "Hi, how are you doing? Do you want to connect back?" Right. So there is that again nudge or trigger to bring that back in. So
You're bringing in accountability through the mentors.
to the mentors, exactly. So that's
Mhm. These mentors are on your payroll. Or what kind of people are they?
it's again a mix. So initially, all the mentors were on payroll, but over time, so
And these are like data science professionals.
data science professionals, correct. And then over time, we have expanded it to our community members, right? So the brilliant thing with Analytics with is, because it's ultimately a community platform, you could tap into a lot of these experts, and they are actually very excited to come back and contribute. So we can tap into the top data scientists in the country, we can tap into the top thought leaders, and then they can come and share their learning. So today, I think almost 70-80% of these mentorship calls are taken by community members. And then obviously there is a onboarding involved in it. So when a community member says they want to do it, they undergo a 3 month hand holding as a mentor, right? So what are the products? What are the best ways to do it? And they themselves go through some of these shadow calls. But by end of month three, they'll start operating independently as a mentor. So
Okay, interesting. And they are paid for every student they mentor. Interesting. Okay. So you've created that mentor onboarding also as a module, like that would be a training module in your system for a mentor to get onboarded.
exactly. Right. And not only mentor onboarding. So during this entire journey, right, we have always been very focused on community, right? So for example, till 2019, all the content on the site was getting published by analytics with their content writers, and then everyone was writing blogs. Today 100% of the publishing is through community contributed articles, and then the volume has gone up 15 times, right? So we were as a because in house we would publish, let's say, 4 articles a week. Today we are publishing 150 articles a month, and the community is sharing their knowledge. So you not only tap into a larger pool, you get very diverse opinions, you get very diverse data sets, very diverse needs, right? So a professional sitting in Africa seeing a problem in their, let's say, banking industry, coming through article, which you just can't do in house, right? So that's where the power of community comes into play, right? We are doing the same thing on webinar, so community members can come today and float what we call as data.
But you must have some quality control mechanism, right? Because
Quality is entirely controlled by analytics with this. So every article gets moderated. So for example, for these 150 articles, we get about 350 submissions. And with each of these submissions, there is an editorial team which works with them. And then for these writers, the feedback which they get is extremely valuable, right? So they get this feedback that how to improve their articles. And now we are doing the same thing on the video side, right? So community members can come and they can share their wish to float a webinar, which we call as data. And then the team would work with them, go through, and the minute they are at a stage where the it looks right thing for the community, then we float it to the community members, right? And this becomes a pool to see who is expert in what areas, what is their skill set, and then that gives us a way to bring these people onto our programs, or let's say if there is a corporate client looking for trainers in a specific domain, this becomes our path to essentially get those people.
okay, interesting. So 2020 31st March, what revenue did you end at? Like you were doing 3 4 CR in 2018. How much did you do?
2020, we had reached about 8 crore in revenue.
And this, how much of this was the edtech revenue?
So 2020, FY 2020, as I said, was almost three equal verticals, right? So there was the community.
30 35% ads and 30 35% through events and hiring.
Correct, correct. And then post that, we have obviously continued to grow. And then COVID changed the mix, right? So overnight, your community events went from paid to free because they were all online now, not no in-person events. Hiring almost became
But events you anyway were doing online only, right?
no event. The monetization, the paid events were essentially offline. So the conference was offline, and so that went away. Similarly, hiring, there was this period of uncertainty in COVID that how would it pan out. There were hiring freezes, etc. On the other end, training demand shot up crazily, right? So overnight, there were a lot of people wanting to spend their lockdowns learning new skills. So we had a huge bump in the traffic on learning pages. So 2020 21 in that sense was a complete distribution reshift. And then for that year, we were essentially a tech company in that sense, right? And then now again we are building a mix of hiring and community events into the community.
What's your current ARR?
So we are at a run rate of about uh, 1.5 to 2 crores a month in that sense.
Okay, okay. So one part of your revenue, which is the B2C edtech revenue, let's just go through your revenue stream. So this B2C edtech revenue, is this self-service sales, or do you have like a sales team which drives sales here? What is the go-to market here? Like,
Yeah, it is assisted sales. So people can come and obviously buy these products off the shelf, and which is what was happening till a few years back. But then we saw a lot of drop offs happening in the journey. So today it is assisted sales, right? So the minute you show interest on the platform, counselor would reach out to you, explain the product, take away confusion, and guide you through the process. So on the B2C side, it's assisted sales for all the tech offerings.
Okay, okay, okay. And the you have like corporate revenue also, like from corporate training,
Yeah, correct, correct.
and how does that happen?
So that happens in a very, so corporate, the intent is to create these extremely customized programs for their needs, right? So for example, one of the clients we are working with, they take about 50 graduates every year. And for those graduates, for the first 6 months, we train them on these technical skills, projects, etc. Month 6 to month 9, there is a hand holding between the client and analytics Vidhya, where so these people are working on the client's project and we are assisting them. And month 9 onwards, they are in the roles at the client's end. Right? So highly customized program, understanding what is the need, and then delivering those in whatever is the right way. Right. So, for example, in this case, because people go through this curriculum at the same time, it's cohort driven. But on the other hand, there are clients where it cannot be cohort driven. So there is a mix of self-paced plus doubt solving and then hackathons and workshops built into the program.
You work with the trainers from your community, or you have like on-roll trainers for the corporate? Okay, okay.
Both. So usually most of the delivery which happens during the weekdays is done by in-house instructors because people would have their own commitments. But it's a mix. There are community members who are actually doing this as a full-time thing for us, but they're acting as freelancers. So it's a mix. And then each of these clients have these specific program we have created, which we deliver end to end for them.
And this would be like a relationship based sales. Like you would have like a salesperson who's going building relationships, finding out if they need.
So, yeah, so interestingly, this is one of the places where people don't realize the power of community. So all the most of the B2B business which we had built till last year was actually inbound interest from community members, right? So a person sitting at a client's and having experienced analytics with their comes back and says, here is a program we want to launch in the company. Can we partner? And can you guys run this end to end? And what that enables us, for example, even for these clients, having the ability to tap in and bring in, for example, we can bring the top data scientists and would come and do these information sessions for the clients. So that power is just immense to create these customized programs. So we haven't been very B2B sales company in that sense. In fact, our B2B sales is,
You don't do too much outbound. Most of your sales is inbound.
yeah. There is one person B2B sales team we have today.
And most of his time would be spent with inbound.
Servicing. And servicing. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So while the play is relationship based, but the discovery, etc., is all inbound. And that's so yeah, with community, that's the big thing that you don't realize the.
And for even for your B2C courses, it would be community. I mean, your top of the funnel would be your community, right? Or do you also spend on performance marketing?
So large businesses through community, we continue to experiment on performance marketing, but what we have seen is that it's nowhere as scalable and as efficient or profit making compared to what we can do from community. So the intent is to continue doubling down on community as opposed to looking at performance marketing engines.
Amazing. Okay. Okay. And okay, so one is corporate training revenue, B2C edtech revenue, then hiring revenue. What is the way you do that? You charge like a per hire, or you charge for like what is the model there?
So what we do is we talk to the companies who are hiring and we would conduct these hackathons and competitions, which we call as jobathons, right? So a typical jobathon, about 20 companies would participate. people would get evaluated on their skills and they would need to solve a problem as well. And based on that, they'll come on a leaderboard. And these profiles would then be shared with these companies who are hiring based on a match. So we built an algorithm at the back which matches that. And finally, when they hire is when they pay us. So it's a success based, because again, the intent is to bring the best opportunities for the community, right? And then any friction you introduce in that process ends up doing disservice to both the sides.
And so you charge like a hiring agency, like a 1 month salary kind of a, with like a that regular term like a replacement and all of those things. Like typically hiring agencies have those kind of terms.
Right. So it's not as similar to it, but the intent is that. For example, replacement clauses, etc., we are not there. But at the same time, for example, if a person didn't join, then yes, we would obviously. So in that sense, it's not a hiring agency. The so we actually tried a few different models before we zeroed in on this. But there was, I mean, the industry works in a particular way, right? And then
Yeah. This is easy to get a buy-in. Otherwise, it'll be very hard to get a buy-in for anything else.
exactly. So we said that let's remove any friction in the way for a HR to hire. And
Okay. Interesting. Okay. And yeah. So what about ad revenue? Like, do edtech still advertise? Because now you're in edtech yourself. So like there is that.
so yeah, so ads we discontinued 2 years back. So we stopped running ads on the site.
So now instead of selling other people's products, you're selling your own products. So which is much higher earning.
We're selling our own products. So in that sense, we have moved away from media model today. It's essentially a community portal where you are essentially trying to add as much value and address a lot of these needs of community members through your own products and through your own network, right? And I mean, directionally, right? For example, in future, the way we see it is all of these people who are contributing back would become creators on analytics with their right. So we would want to enable people who are, let's say, there is a data scientist working at a large bank who wants to offer a course on credit risk modeling. By all means, we should be able to enable that, right? So the direction is that we would want to have close control on the content, but bring out that expertise which sits in the community and continue to build on that.
Okay. Amazing. So these are essentially your revenue sources now: hiring and corporate training and edtech, like the B2C edtech. Okay. You also raised your first institutional round. I think last year you raised it, right? Tell me about that.
So we raised this round from Fractal, and Fractal is again a very domain-focused company, right? So in that sense, it is exactly the domain we want to be in, and it's a company where people understand community.
So just for people who don't know, what is Fractal?
So Fractal is India's largest analytics and AI services company. Works extremely focused on Fortune 100 clients, right? So high value engagements, very tightly knit engagements, and the aim is to solve problems for these Fortune 100 companies, right? So they are about 4,000 people company today, and again growing very fast, right? So
Fractal would be doing what, say, McKinsey, Bain, BCG do, except they would be doing it through the lens of data.
exactly. And so data behavioral design is the area where they focus on.
Behavioral design. What is this? I've never heard of this.
So the way consumers behave is very different from what you would think logically, right? So there are these inherent biases which come in. So the unique proposition for Fractal is that, so obviously they bring in the data expertise, but they also understand these biases and behavioral studies which go into creating these products or services, right? So the UI UX design or how to go about solving those. So it's a mix of these dimensions which Fractal brings on table. And so for us, it makes tremendous sense to have someone like Fractal back us. So they understand the domain, they understand the community business, right?
But why do they understand community business? They are a services business, right? Like,
they are services business, but the leadership team there understands the power of community. In fact, 2014, this was the time when I was writing the article. So I reached out to Shrikant, who is CEO of Fractal at that time, for an interview. And he was the first business leader to agree to doing the interview on the portal, right? So since then, I've always used him as a mentor. At any point, if I face a conflict, for example, the media model versus community model, he was the person I was brainstorming with. So there was so in that sense, the community aspect, Fractal just gets it. And then, in fact, since the time we have raised the strategic investments, our focus on community has actually increased a lot more because the what everyone understands the power which it brings in, and that's why it's not a so while it's obviously an institutional investor, it is someone who understands the domain, understands the community, and it brings in a lot of domain expertise, right? So the problems which these Fortune 100 companies are facing, that experience of solving those problems, where is the industry heading, what are the kind of challenges people would expect in coming years, all of those can come through their expertise essentially.
okay, fascinating. They would probably also see this as a way to increase the pool of data professionals and data talent in India, which also ties into their business growth.
Correct. Exactly. From Fractal's perspective, there is this talent problem which is there. Talent and employer branding to some extent. More importantly, they are actually committed to creating a standard for talent, right? So if you think about it, there is no equivalent of CFA in analytics and data science today, right? So Fractal is committed to creating that standard, and that's
Like a globally recognized qualification.
nice certificate. Exactly right. So that's the second area. And then what we are also doing with Fractal is taking some of these offerings to Fractal's clients. So the B2B expertise and programs which we create can run for Fractal's clients as well. So there is tremendous synergies which can be unlocked, and that's what we are doing through this.
Amazing, amazing. Okay. So on the product front, you built like one product was like the WordPress blog. Then there was a hackathon product which allowed you to share a problem and for people to upload. And then that hackathon product led to the modules product. What else has happened in terms of product evolution?
So LMS is another part which has been on
And LMS is learning management system. It's basically like a way to manage your learner's journey.
learning management. Correct. Course learner's journey. Exactly. Right. And across all of this, right, all the information about the user, so their skills, for example. So we've built this evaluation engine and a certification platform which has inbuilt security features, right? So for example, in the jobathons, when a person is participating, there are security features enabled onto the platform, that while you are taking the test, you cannot copy paste anything from the window. There is monitoring happening and proctoring happening. So this entire evaluation platform and a 360-degree view of these learners, right? So people are working and then engaging on analytics with the across all these products. They are reading articles, they are attending webinars, they are participating in these competitions, they are probably undergoing a few courses. So we are building this 360-degree view of these learners in the backend. And what we are today building is how do we enable this creator economy onto the platform, where people can come and while they are sharing their knowledge, they can also start getting this back from the community. And so it's in that sense building this entirely new ecosystem where people are contributing back, but in the process, everyone is benefiting.
So essentially these UGC articles, like you said, you publish 150 articles a month, which are UGC, user generated content. So the users who submit these articles, what are they getting back?
So there are a couple of things, right? So the biggest thing is that they are getting their profile and expertise. So they are positioning themselves social proof. So that's one. And then there is a monetary angle to it. So the way we have defined it is there is a base reward. So every time your article gets published, you get a base reward. And then depending on how good the article does, you can make more rewards on it. So in that sense,
This is like cash reward.
cash rewards, correct, correct. There is a cash reward. So again, so the idea is, you have to enable this creator economy, and for that to happen, you have to do it at scale, right? So initially, for example, people were contributing purely because of social proof, and then they had learned from analytics with their, so they were coming back and contributing. But then you can't scale it as much, and that's where this entire engine for creating these articles came in. And again, just to share some stats, right? Today, if you publish a technical article on analytics Vidya versus you publish it on Medium or LinkedIn, analytics Vidya would give you much higher visibility than what a LinkedIn does or what a Medium does, right? So that's the key differentiator, right? So you're in the domain, the viewers are very relevant, you're getting positioned in front of people, so the visibility which analytics is providing is a lot higher than what you would get if you would publish this elsewhere. And the idea is that if we could replicate the same thing for videos, for example, if people creating these technical videos get higher visibility than what they would get on a YouTube, then you essentially crack the problem.
So you have like a video platform also. I thought your video platform was webinars. You're also allowing like UGC videos, like.
So we are building that. That's yeah. So that's what we are building today, and that's where community members can come and contribute back, and everyone in the process is benefiting.
And throughout these platforms, like based on how many views it gets, people will get rewarded.
Correct, exactly. It could be views. It could be engagement metrics. For example, how many people have engaged on the articles you've written. Yes, exactly.
Okay. So Analytics Vidya is like a full-fledged social network. Like you can watch videos, you can read articles, you can post something. Like you can have like user-generated posts also, which don't need an approval, or you can start a thread on something, or like a
So there is approval for any publishing you need. For any comments or questions, it gets published, and there is obviously a algorithm at the back. So whenever it sees any fishy, obviously it puts in the moderation queue. But by and large, as long as you're doing technical discussions, you should be able to ask those questions, get answers without any moderation. But if you have to publish anything, right? So if you have to publish an article or if you have to publish a webinar, then there is a moderation queue which is there.
why not go full-fledged UGC? Just not have an approval mechanism. Just allow anyone who wants to publish to just start publishing. Anyone who wants to upload a video can just upload it, and like any social network.
Yeah. So again, brilliant question. We have asked this multiple times ourselves. The thing is that in analytics with there's growth, right? One of the key reasons why people come back is that they see the quality of content, and they see analytics Vidya has this ability to take complex topics and then break it down into small, easy to digest pieces, right? So we want to retain that in the content which we create, right? So for each of these articles, that's where a lot of work happens with these contributors. That today, if someone, let's say, just publishes the theoretical construct in form of an article, we'll say that we'll not be able to publish it. here are the changes we would want you to make. How can a learner benefit from it? What are the three things they can take away from it? And that's where
So I understand you're saying you want to control quality of articles, but this can be solved in this way. You could have, like Twitter has a blue tick, so you could have a blue tick on articles which are analytics Vidhya approved articles, and in general have anyone publish, and the data will tell you which article is a quality article. You can just see that which article is getting more engagement, which means it is a quality article, which means it gets shown to more people. Like you could solve it like that.
correct. So it could be solved like that. And then, I mean, there are different ways, right? So this is one. The other one could be that you say that there are open community articles. Another one is a feature list. So the best articles, you put it on the feature list. Or now we said that let's make sure that we are doing it in a slightly more controlled way. We might open it up as we grow, right? It's something which we continuously evaluate. And as long so the intent is that as long as anything which is getting published is of value, we would want to enable it, right? We just don't want people to come in and republish a lot of content which is either plagiarized or so plagiarism is another problem which gets filtered in this process, right? So that's the key reason. And yeah, but depending on how, so we want to definitely open it up, but in a controlled manner is what we're doing it today.
Got it. Okay, okay, okay. Got it. You spoke about CFA for analytics. Is that something which is on your roadmap to create that kind of a globally accepted qualification?
Correct, correct. And then we are working with Fractal closely on this to build this. But that's the intent that can we have a globally recognized certification, which essentially becomes a proof in itself, a gold standard for talent.
And how would that work? Would it just be a series of exams, or would it be a course that you have to take, or how would it work? Like,
Right. So a lot of that is under works right now. For now, it would be, a curriculum or a standard defined and a program which people can opt for, right? So people can go through the journey, but people can independently also just sign up for the exam and then say that I'll want to undergo this certification. So, but what we are clear is it has to be offered together. So instead of just saying that here is the certification, there is a way to get there for people. That's the way we are approaching it.
okay, okay. So this year you're likely to end at 20 CR type of top line. Will that be like, will you be like profitable with that number, or like what is your path to profitability looking like?
So fundamentally, the business which we have, right? It's fundamentally a profitable business, right? Last 3 years we were profitable.
Yeah, because your customer acquisition cost is very low. You don't have to burn money to get customers.
This year, we are looking at running some of these experiments. We are building these platforms. So this year, we would not aim for profitability in that sense. Having said that, none of the fundamentals change, right? So at any point, we can steer the business towards profitability.
Okay. What is the way to make this 20 CR as 100 CR or 500 CR? What do you see are those things that you need to do? Like, do you need to go global? Do you need to have more expensive courses also? Or like, talk to me about that.
So I think the biggest thing is to continue to become the single platform for any knowledge need which a data professional would have, right? So the aim is that every data professional should be there on the portal doing their learning either through open learn. So that's the biggest ask. And my fundamental belief is if that happens, we'll be able to monetize and then grow the platform like we've been doing till now, right? So that's the key focus. That keep investing back in the community, bring these products which are high value, specific, address specific needs, and continue to build business. Right, a few levers which we are actively investing in. So today, for example, most of the content is around data science. Last few years, we've started building content on data engineering. We have started building courses on Web3 recently. So the idea is that any need which a data professional might have, should get sufficed to the platform. And then as we do it, I'm sure the revenues would take care of themselves in that sense.
Okay, got it. Data science as a field, we discussed this briefly about its evolution. I remember there was a time when the big buzzword was big data, and today it is machine learning. What is the difference between these terms? Like for an outsider, what is the difference between data science, data engineering, machine learning, AI? Because these terms are very often used interchangeably. Help me understand technically what is the difference between them.
Sure. So let me explain through very simple analogy, right? So let's say you are working in a automobile company, right? Now, if you think about how that business is organized, there would be these specific career tracks or there would be these specific profiles, right? So there would be a scientist sitting in a lab optimizing the engine, right? So the key problem that person would be working on is how can I make this engine more efficient? Can I get 20% more mileage or can I increase the torque further, right? So that's the problem which a scientist is working on, very specific problem. And you don't need an army of scientists, right? You need a few PhDs or a few people who can really tackle that problem, right? So that's one profile.
And that is, in our analogy, that is data science, the equivalent.
That is data scientist sitting in an organization working on a very specific problem. And the work ends when there is a POC which has been created, right? So the person is not expected to put it in production, right? On the other hand, there would be these engineers who are working in the plant, in the engineering unit. And what they would do is take these findings which the scientists have done and put them in production, right? So how should the assembly line look? Who would do what? All of that is being handled by engineers. So in similar analogy, data engineers essentially build these pipelines. So how is the data flowing from different systems? Which data would come at what frequency? So, for example, Uber needs it in real time, bank needs it on a daily basis. So every data source would have their own needs. So that's what a data engineer would do. So collate all of these different sources, make that ready for this algorithm which the data scientist has built, put it in production and maintain that on a day-to-day basis, right? So those are your data engineers. And then you have a layer of management, right, who is taking decisions. So how many units do we want to produce, and what is the cost of raw material, what is the ROI like? So these are your business analysts in our analogy, right? So people who are working closely with business and using data to solve problems, like what I was doing at Capital One, right? So those are the essentially career tracks, right? A data scientist, data engineer, and a business analyst. Now there are tools. So machine learning is a tool, right? So who is using it? So obviously data scientist needs to know machine learning inside out. A data engineer needs to understand what machine learning does and put it in production. So they may not know the algorithm which brings in that next 20% uplift, but they should understand what this algorithm does. And for a business analyst today, a lot of time is going in analysis as opposed to machine learning.
Machine learning is different from algorithms, right? What is the difference between them? Like, I mean, machine learning is core AI, right? Often people would say we are an AI powered product, but they are actually an algorithm powered product. And I'm just saying this because I've heard other people talk about it. I personally don't know the difference between these two, but
Sure. Yeah. So machine learning is essentially the set of techniques which enable machines to become smarter, right? So they're building logic, which is done through these algorithms, right? So an algorithm which is working on a specific problem today cannot be taken to another problem and expected to work, right? So you need people who are tuning or matching these algorithms to the right problems. And what you're essentially trying to build is intelligence or artificial intelligence. So machine learning is the way to build artificial intelligence, and algorithms are essentially enabling it.
is this understanding correct that an algorithm is somewhat something written based on our understanding of the world, whereas in machine learning, you are feeding machine data and asking it to understand the world.
So algorithm has both these classes, right? There could be algorithms which you have defined, or there could be algorithms which it has learned from data. And machine learning is essentially learning from data and evolving it, right? So for example, today when you do Google searches, there is no one at the back sitting and fine-tuning that algorithm, right? So it is learning from the searches and evolving the results on by itself. That's machine learning, right? On
So, like if I run a search and I choose a result on page two, then the machine knows that page one results were not great and the page two result was better. So, and then it'll look at similar such searches and draw some sort of analysis and what is the most relevant result. Hmm.
were not great. Exactly. And that's machine learning in action. On the other end, assuming you are not at that scale, if you're looking at analysts to see what products are our customers finding useful on the website, that's simple analysis. Sorry. And you could use that in a rules driven manner. So, for example, today I can say that most of the people coming to analytics, they want to learn machine learning. So, I'll show that in the first four, right? So, I have defined the algorithm, how the page comes, right? That's one way. But I could also say that I don't want to do it. I am just throwing all the content in it, and it by itself brings the most relevant things up. And when you build that engine, that's machine learning. Almost every social media platform would have their own recommendation. In fact, that's the make or break thing, right? Because as a user, you would have a few seconds of attention, and if you can grab that, and that's where I think YouTube has done this brilliantly, right? Once you start watching a video, most of the people would find it very difficult to step out of it.
So on the edtech side, you are essentially competing with like a great learning, upgrad, and these are all like multi-billion dollar valuation companies. So you know what makes you think that you can win? Because they are also offering data science courses and machine learning courses and all. It's a lucrative field. So
Correct. So fundamentally, we don't see ourselves as a pure edtech player, right? So we are actually not in a war to win against these people in that sense, right? What we are building is a community platform focused on data professionals, and any need these customers might have is what we need to serve, right? Today, education is one of the need. Tomorrow, for example, so one of the products which you've built today is a way to build data engineering pipelines on the browser, right? So we are using it to run competitions that people can write code and build these pipelines in the browser. So in that sense, what we are building is not a tech company. So in that sense, it's not right to compare against them. Yes, there today a lot of revenue comes from education as a offering, but there also our value proposition is very different, right? We are building these very application oriented, outcome driven programs, which help. So we are not in a business of providing college degrees or bringing degrees online. That's the fundamental difference, right? And that's where, for example, our choice of looking at investor was fundamentally different. So for us, success is not the edtech revenue we make. The success is how many people are we able to make a career impact on, and how many data professionals across the globe are on analytics if there's a platform.
so a better comparison would be GitHub then for you.
GitHub or LinkedIn for data scientists, for example, is what we are building.
Okay, okay, okay. And like say GitHub has built this Copilot product where it allows coders to have a AI supported experience to make them more productive. Do you think you'll build something like that for data professionals, like a Copilot?
That Yeah, that would fit brilliantly with what we are doing, and that's where that's why I was saying we are not a tech company in the way we are looking. And then that's the exact kind of problems we would want to solve.
So I'm sitting with Kunal again. We recorded what you've heard so far 6 months plus back, I guess, more than 6 months ago. So I just wanted to catch up once with Kunal, get in some update before we release the episode. So, Kunal, a lot of action has happened in the space of data science, machine learning, especially with OpenAI completely changing the field. Uh, just share with us what are some of the recent updates, how are you responding to them? How has the business model evolved?
Sure, Akshay. Thanks for circling back on that. So uh, uh, it has been crazy period in terms of the amount of development and the impact which generative AI has created, right? So I mean, when we were recording, if you would have asked me, how quickly the pace of AI adoption would change, even in my wildest dreams, I wouldn't have predicted what has happened. So OpenAI yeah, released the Chat GPT module first, and then followed it up with GPT-4, and then I think just 2 days back, uh, they are now releasing their first multimodal generative AI model, which is essentially combining Tally and Chat GPT. So you could now do chat as well as vision through a single model, right? So a lot of action, obviously, and I think this was probably the first time when a lot of people not in the field saw the impact of what generative AI could create, right? So all of a sudden, I think it was one of those moments like, when COVID lockdowns overnight, the interest in online learning grew. Similarly, when ChatGPT released, I think within like a week, everyone wanted to know what is possible, what is not possible, how do I use these tools. So a lot of action has happened since. And the way we are looking at it is, there are largely two levels where, in terms of how we are approaching it. So the first one is general users who can use these tools to increase their productivity. And let's say I'm a blogger, I want to get a first draft out. I can use these tools to get these first draft out. I'm a designer, I want some design ideas to come through. I'll just give a prompt to Midjourney and it will throw back some ideas. So great at creating these first drafts, doing some brainstorming, and then obviously human is still in the loop, so you need to optimize. So that's the end user game. So that's one sort of audience, and then the second audience, which is I think our core audience, are people who are building these technologies, right? So OpenAI is a proprietary model. You can only call APIs, and then there are a set of restrictions about how you could use them, how you could not use them. Parallelly, there is a open source, so Llama 2, which was released by Meta, and Microsoft also had a partnership there. That's open source, but it's not performing as good as OpenAI models. Right? So for any commercial use, Llama 2 is a better model. So there are a lot of people who are still dabbling about, how do you solve specific problems? How do I use these technologies on my own data set and train, for example, let's say an internal chatbot, or can I use this to, get first drafts of the code based on my existing code. So all of those applications which are very developer focused, and that's the audience which we get. So these are the two kind of separate audience, and obviously the first one is a lot bigger, but that's not the market we focus so much on. The second one is where we focus on. Uh, so what we have done is essentially, multiple things. First of all, we again truly believe that, this needs to be evangelized. So we have started doing a lot of meetups across country. So for example, yesterday we had 3 meetups running in parallel in Chennai, Bangalore, and Hyderabad. It focused entirely on generative AI and its adoption. What are the challenges it comes in? How do you trust the models which we are building, etc. So that's kind of just evangelizing the subject. Then there are, master series and workshops which we are doing, which are again, let's say 8 hour workshop for people who have committed that they want to dabble around, go and, actually build these technologies. So that's the second offering which has come up, where we are saying that if you want to accelerate in this domain, within 8 hours, you can come learn from the expert and then stay with this group as you continue to build these applications. So that's the
Yeah, what is
second.
the pricing for this 8 hour workshop?
So 8 hour workshop typically would be between 10 to 15,000 rupees. So that's the idea, and all the infra is taken care for you. So for example, we did the first set of these workshops along with Data Hack Summit, and there were 200 people who were using these GPUs throughout the day, right? So, in fact, we tried reaching out to multiple cloud service providers, and at that time, no one was running these, GPUs at such a scale. So that's the magnitude of these master series workshops. So that's the second level, and then third, we are coming up with our generative AI program. So similar to the Black Belt program, it would again be a subscription with one-on-one mentorship, and that's launching on 1st of December. So that's already out released to the community. They can sign up in the early bird release. But that's for the developer market. Those are the three levels in the way we are approaching the market. Personally, I think and then we've been talking to a lot of experts. I think in general, the feeling is this is one of the, moments when the acceleration in the domain changes significantly. And the technology is out there. I think the key question is how do you adopt and how do you put these in use cases and then still kind of solve some of the UI UX issues for the users. So I think the most common use case which I see is in information retrieval. So you have a large set of documents, you just want someone to quickly summarize it. That's the easiest one, and I think every company is trying to either build their own chatbots or build something in that direction, to something which is very very refined as well, that you for example, for analytics with there, can we create a bot where people can just ask questions and learn instead of trying to figure out their ways through numerous articles, numerous videos, and all of these things. Can I just come and say, I want to learn generate basics in the next 2 hours? uh, do that for me, and then I'll follow what you say. So I think we are in middle of that journey, but what is very clear is that this is going to have a huge impact. It is going to fundamentally change how we use information products.
Does this give you like a revenue boost? Because there would be, at this stage at least,
Yeah,
a strong interest in learning generative AI. It's like the hot new thing, so
correct.
does that?
So it is one of those periods where you want to kind of maximize how much you can kind of create a difference. So, and what we're seeing is actually very interesting, right? So there are two directions in which we are seeing the revenue boost coming from. One is what I mentioned, right? So people who want to specialize in generative AI, today, this knowledge is almost non-existent, right? So if you have to, for example, learn machine learning today, there are numerous options, numerous courses. But if you have to really learn and build generative AI, there aren't many options out there today. So that's one area where that's clearly an incremental revenue stream. The second one is because it has now generated so much excitement, everyone internally is asking, what can I do with these technologies? How can I improve using these technologies? And what we're seeing is a lot of companies and people want to learn a data literacy program or awareness program where even though you're not directly building these technologies, you could still be a salesperson, a HR person, or a marketing person, but you need to know how to use these tools and technologies best and how to keep yourself up to speed with these. So those are the two kind of streams. The first one is where you already have products out there. The second one is where it's more B2B in nature. But I believe that that's a much bigger market, right? So both of these are incremental revenue streams for us.
One last question. What is the difference between ChatGPT and an open source large language model like Llama? Like you host Llama on your own server and like you can just download the code for it, or like what is fundamentally the difference?
So, so the fundamental difference is ChatGPT is built on proprietary technology, right? So they're not releasing the exact models, the exact weights, the way it has been trained. In fact, that's kind of the secret sauce, right? And the terms and conditions of the model very clearly state that you can. I mean, there are limitations about how you can use it commercial. In the and on the open source also there are different levels, right? So there are models which release what they do, but they don't allow for commercial usage. Llama 2 is the most open model in that sense. So it's a continuum. It's not just closed source and open source. Uh, but Llama 2 is the other extreme where it says that here is the model. I've got the base version out. Feel free to use it in the way you want, right? So that's the continuum. Now, depending on your use case, right, you would want to pick what is the best one. And I mean, while there are options to stop data sharing with chat gpt etc., that's still a concern. So the organizations still feel that their data is going out if they want to use chat gpt for any internal products or any internal use cases. So that's where open source is going to have a much bigger impact, because a lot of people are actually interested in building these open source models because they create a much bigger community impact. Over the next 2 to 3 years, they should kind of close the gap between in the performance between what let's say a open AI model is doing versus what these open source models are doing. So a lot of people are contributing to, a lot of people are trying out different versions. And then again, some of these are getting trained on 7 billion parameters. Some of them are getting trained on even 100 billion parameters. So people are trying all of these things and then releasing it back to the community. So I think it will take some time, but my sense is in probably 2 to 3 years time, the performance gap should definitely narrow down. And once that starts happening, then you have a true boost of a lot of use cases which are built on completely open source platforms. It's very similar to, for example, what Python and R did before that. It was SAS, which was very proprietary, so it was getting used in limited use cases. When Python came, they were completely open source, and then the domain proliferated, right? So similarly, I think as soon as we see better performance or closure of the gap, we'll see again another boost coming.
And so something like say Python would be like an executable software, something you can execute
Right.
on your desktop. Is that
Mhm.
what a Llama 2 is also like an executable? What is
Well, it's not there today, to be honest. I mean, today you would need to go on GitHub. You would need to install it on your machine or a server, depending on what. But it's not too far away, right? So I can very
okay?
easily say that here is a executable file which you can just download. And the bigger challenge right now is making sure you have the hardware, making sure that you choose the right number of parameters, because if you choose very big, your normal laptops would not be able to suffice. So that's the challenge. But I think that will be solved. It's not too far away from getting solved even today. And there are people who are trying out these different models. Llama 2, Auto GPT, a lot of people have installed on their laptops, and then they are trying to automate tasks. So a lot of that action is happening. I think some of these would result into new products, new softwares, new ways of doing things. Some of them would probably end up as good experiments. Irrespective, I think people need to figure out their way through GitHub codes and repositories. It's not too far away where you could just on a click of button download and then get started.
And that brings us to the end of this conversation. I want to ask you for a favor now. Did you like listening to this show? I'd love to hear your feedback about it. Do you have your own startup ideas? I'd love to hear them. Do you have questions for any of the guests that you heard about in this show? I'd love to get your questions and pass them on to the guests. Write to me at ad@thepodium.in. That's ad@thepodium.in.